So, welcome. It is wonderful to be in conversation today with Gabriel Kahane, who Meany has worked with for many years now. And so it's really fabulous to be continuing our partnership as you're working on a new piece. So, welcome, Gabriel.
Thank you. It's great to see you, Michelle.
I just want to say, briefly, for those of you who don't know Gabriel Kahane, he has not only sort of the recipient of the Charles Ives Fellowship from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. He has been a Mellon Creative Fellow at the University of Washington, was a very much New Yorker, and then has moved to Portland and really helped to create a really even more vibrant music scene there. He took a year off of the internet and created his most recent project that Meany commissioned and premiered called Magnificent Bird, and then has gone on to record that with a whole wealth of really incredible artists, and is now working on a new piece for us in collaboration with the ensemble Roomful of Teeth. So, um, you've been working a lot as a soloist and then also a lot with orchestras. And I'm curious about this new piece with Roomful of Teeth. If you can talk about how you started thinking about this work and yeah, go from there.
Absolutely. Yeah, and just to say it's great to be in conversation. And as always, I feel tremendous gratitude to you and your colleagues for making such a vibrant home for me and for so many of my colleagues. Um, I got an email, gosh, it must have been when I was still living in Brooklyn. So this would have been sometime in 2019 from Brad Wells, founder of Roomful of Teeth, and Cameron, who's sort of more recently taken the reins from him, asking if I would have a conversation with them about a new project. And I thought, oh, they want me to write a 5-10 minute piece. And some years later, we finally met over Zoom. I think this was sort of post pandemic, or the phase of the pandemic that we're in. Maybe it was sometime in late 2021. Or early 2022, and they made it clear that they were interested in a substantial sort of album length work. And then sort of fast forward to August of 2022, they have an annual retreat at MassMoCA, which is the incredible art museum in North Adams, Massachusetts, where they sort of take over a dance studio for the better part of 2 weeks and work on various projects. They do a performance at the end of that. And so I spent, I think, 2 or 3 days with them, really just kind of in the act of play. And you mentioned that I've been doing a lot of work by myself and then with orchestras. And I realized when I sat with these 8 singers in this room, filled with beautiful summer Massachusetts light, how much I had been craving this kind of encounter of not having the pressure of the union clock that we have in an orchestral setting, not having the fear of judgment from, you know, musicians who maybe in an orchestral setting wish that they were playing Brahms and Beethoven and not dealing with newfangled new work. Whereas a group like Roomful of Teeth, one of the things that's so spectacular about them is that their entire repertoire comprises work that has been written for them. So obviously judgment is still possible in that context, but it has a sort of different flavor. And I was reminded in that room of something that another Teeth member, Caroline Shaw, has said, that cooking is like chamber music and baking is like orchestral music, because as an orchestral composer, you send the parts off to the librarian and you show up at the first rehearsal, and there's very, very little at that point that you can do. You can add a little bit of finishing salt, maybe you can do an egg wash, but it's kind of whatever you put into the oven is what you're taking out. And that has to do with the vagaries of how orchestras operate. Whereas with chamber music, it's an incredibly social encounter. You're very often working with friends. You're thinking as much about the person who's playing the instrument as much as what instrument they're playing. And I think that's maybe even more the case when it comes to the human voice, where the distance between the soul and the instrument collapses to, to almost zero.
Mhm.
And that's where I think the sort of the cooking metaphor becomes apt, because you're there with your saute pan and you taste it and you realize that you want more acid or you want more heat. And that for me was sort of the joy of being in the room with Roomful of Teeth in that first encounter last summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who don't know who Roomful of Teeth is, or you haven't had a chance to experience them, Roomful of Teeth is a Grammy-winning. They call themselves a vocal band, and they're really dedicated to reimagining the expressive potential of the human voice. And their process is really a huge part of who they are. They engage with artists, thinkers, community members, and really seeking to develop work that uplifts and amplifies new voices and creates new performance forms and adventurous music through these collaborations. And they've worked with a whole range of really amazing artists, including you, Gabriel. And it's notable that one of the pieces that's also on the program is a piece by Caroline Shaw, and Caroline is a founding member of Roomful of Teeth. So, as you've been thinking about creating work for this particular ensemble that has, so much range and so much ability, how are you sort of how is working with Teeth different from working with other ensembles that you've worked with in the past, and how is that informing your approach to this music?
Yeah. So at the end of that initial workshop period in August of 2022, we had a sort of sit down meeting together. And one of the things that had emerged through those sessions, I had asked each of them to make a voice memo, both with the sort of unusual extended techniques that they're individually and collectively capable of, but then also just 8 or 16 bars of a song. Roomful of Teeth is known, of course, for all kinds of extended techniques that draw from various singing cultures. Um, but what became clear in listening to these voice memos is that they're also really great singers who can just sing a song. And there's very little of the Teeth repertoire that has showcased that side of what they do. And of course, that aligns really well with what I do, which is that I'm first and foremost a songwriter. So the sort of working title for the project was the Roomful of Teeth Songbook, and the notion was that I would write a piece that kind of married what Teeth does best to what I do best, which is write songs. And from there, to be totally honest, I got really, really busy, and the piece was then out of my mind until probably, I don't know, summer of this year. Um, and when I came back to thinking about it, the final day of our workshop in 2022, I had written a sketch. I was sort of, sketching at night and early in the morning, and then presenting things to them. So on each day of the workshop, I was bringing in sketches that I'd been working on at night or early in the morning. And on the final day, I brought in this sketch that was a response to the hotel that I was staying in, which was a few blocks away from Mass Mocha and was in the process of being rebranded from a Holiday Inn to a little boutique hotel. But it was very much, in this sort of hotel purgatory. There was signage both for Holiday Inn and for the new branding, and there was no one staying there. It was, I think, me and Natalie Joachim, my friend and colleague, and it was profoundly creepy. And one of the things that I've always loved to do is to write text on hotel stationery, in part because it's a limiting factor. These pieces of paper are really, really tiny. And so I wrote this lyric that was sort of a meditation on this creepy hotel, the first line of which was, "To be honest, this hotel is kind of creepy." And anyway, so I brought it in and we sang through it and they enjoyed it. And then a few weeks later, Cameron wrote to me and he said, "Hey, can we actually perform this? We really are enjoying it." So it's this little piece called Speaking in Tongues that's both kind of funny, but also creepy and sad. And when I came back to finally working on this Roomful of Teeth songbook, um, I I pretty quickly came to the notion of, first thought, best thought. There was something in that that they really liked, and knowing that I wanted to make a kind of anthology piece that was going to bring together all these voices individually and collectively, the idea of using a hotel as a container became very appealing to me. And so the frame of the piece, this is really not giving anything away, the frame of the piece is that all of the songs exist in different rooms and different spaces in this hotel. And that as we sort of progress through the piece, we start to realize that the hotel is not limited to a single dimension or geographic location, that as we move through the hotel, we're sort of moving through time and through space. And I think it's in as much as a lot of my work is narrative based and lives in the realm of theater, um, it creates a canvas in which I can do a lot. Um, and that's those are sort of the broad strokes of the piece. I could go into more detail, but then that starts to get into the realm of, um, if I can describe it to you, then you probably don't need to hear the piece.
And when you think about the strengths of Roomful of Teeth as an ensemble, what are the things that, like, the top things that come to your mind in terms of why you're excited to work with them, and what comes to mind as their, like,
Yeah.
standing qualities as an ensemble?
Well, I think this is maybe a sort of peculiar response, but so I returned to Mass MoCA this August for a second workshop with them. And rather than making music, I spent a day asking them a bunch of questions. I had a series of prompts because I really wanted to sort of bring their lived experience into the text of this piece. And so this is a very, very roundabout way of answering your question. What is exceptional about Roomful of Teeth? Um, and I would say, for me at this stage of my career, or my creative life, what's most important to me is that I love the people that I'm writing for, because I think I write the best music when I'm writing for another human being, not for a specific instrument or color. And so what's really exciting in working on this is that I can sort of imagine both how they will attack the material, um, but also having the memory of the time that I've spent with them in my mind feeds the process,
Mhm.
where I have, just because they spent a fair amount of time, because I had introduced the broad idea of the hotel. I heard a lot about the foibles of what it is to be on tour with Roomful of Teeth, and funny, and sometimes tragic, uh, you know travel mishaps,
Mm.
and just having all of that kind of rattling around in my brain, or rummaging around in my brain, as my 5-year-old daughter would say. um, I I sort of feel like they're with me while I'm working on the piece, and that's the greatest gift, for I think a composer, is to have that spirit transmitted and present even at a great distance.
Mm, beautiful. Thank you. I wanted to shift to something that, we were talking about actually when we first got on this call, which is about, all the stuff that's happening in the world, and how challenging it is for everyone to process and to try to understand on some level. And the University of Washington and Meany Center are working on really thinking about the role of art in creating connectedness, inclusivity, belonging, and on some level, even wellness, and broadly writ. And I'm curious, as you think about your work on this piece, as you think about the work that you're seeing and experiencing that's really exciting you and really influencing your thought now, how do you see that the do you see a healing a role on some level for the arts? And what does that look like in the context of some really, really, really difficult things that this planet is going through?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think some of the ways in which art heals are baked into what a performing arts center does, which is just that you bring people into the same room.
Yeah.
And I think on the one hand that sounds sort of hallmarky and obvious, and on the other hand, particularly coming out of a time when many of us didn't leave our homes for months at a time, when there was a fear of contagion in the air, but
Hmm.
also the the technological paradigm that we're in, both from the vantage point of so many technologies that have sort of obviated the need for humans to share space with each other, but
Hmm.
also the fact that the performing arts now competes with so much content,
Hmm.
and that it's not just, you know, Netflix, or other streaming services. It's also like competing with TikTok and Instagram, and so I think it really can't be overstated in my view, the mitzvah that is bringing people into space to be together, to, you know, to listen to a piece of music or to see a dance or to see a play, or to hear someone read a poem.
Hmm.
So that's one thing that I think it can never be stated enough, that
Yeah.
that has such tremendous value.